All right, hello everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank you all for joining today, wherever you are in the world. We're so happy to have you. Thrilled to have you with us. My name is Jennifer Morris. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at MadCap Software. And I'm delighted to have one of my favorite educators with us today, Matthew Ellison. Matthew is a certified trainer, the Director of UA Europe, Mad Skills consultant, and frequent speaker at TechCom conferences all over the world, including MadWorld, MadCap's own user conference. So we're so happy to have you here. Welcome, Matthew. Today, Matthew's going to be talking about creating effective landing pages. These are such an important navigation element in HTML5 outputs. We often think of navigation elements as maybe just the table of contents or maybe just a breadcrumb trail at the top of the page, but the landing page is often the first thing people see when they come to a doc portal or a knowledge base or a help system or whatever you call your output from Flare. So well-designed landing pages can help readers quickly navigate through all of the wonderful information that you're presenting. And the idea of a well-designed landing page can go beyond that first topic we see when we come to a home screen. It can tie into elements like micro-content for search results, maybe embedded help. So today, Matthew's going to help us navigate through some of these techniques for enhancing your landing pages and making them work brilliantly on a range of devices as well. So as always, we have a lot to cover today. So I want to just review two quick items of business before we jump right in. Just a reminder, this webinar is going to be recorded. So if you have to leave early, no problem. We'll send you a link to the recording as soon as it's done. There's also a question panel in the GoToWebinar console that you see. So we would encourage you to type questions in there as we go. We're going to do our best to get to as many as we can at the end. Whatever we don't get to live, we'll follow up with a question and answer document. So please use that question area as a place to post those questions. So once again, Matthew, thanks so much for joining today. It's always so lovely to be with you. So thank you, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and put myself on mute and turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer. I'm going to come off camera because that's going to save bandwidth, I think. You don't want to be looking at my face anyway. You're more interested in the content. Let's get on to the first slide. Now you've heard from Jennifer all about me, so you don't need to hear me say anything more, apart from the fact, well, that I am an amateur actor, and we're just entering our second lockdown today in the UK, and I'm planning to spend some of that time recording some podcasts. In fact, we're planning to continue recording Alice in Wonderland. Okay. So that's what I do when I'm not working with Flare and doing docs and that kind of thing. What are we going to cover today? Well, we're talking about landing pages. So I'm going to give you a short introduction to what landing pages are, and in particular, what we mean by great landing pages, not just any old landing pages, great landing pages. And I am going to give you some techniques. So it's going to be, this is really an excuse for me to show you some of my favorite features of Flare, including responsive layout. We're going to look at Flexbox Layout as well, which is not really a feature of Flare, but is a very useful way of making your content responsive. And we're going to look at mouseover effects, clickable tiles on landing pages, and we're going to look at the menu proxy, which is going to be very, very useful for creating landing pages in conjunction with master pages. If I have time, and I've got a lot to go through, and I did promise Jennifer I was going to finish on time today. I usually don't. If I have time, I'm also going to show you an even more advanced, or a very advanced technique that uses scripting to pull in topic descriptions from other pages into landing pages at runtime, so that the landing pages give you a little bit more information than they otherwise would. Okay, what are landing pages? Well, Jennifer mentioned how important they are. Often the first things that people see when they enter our documentation, and that's true. They have a variety of different names. I've heard them called contents topics. I've heard them call them, the dashboard. The home page is an example of a landing page, but I've also heard people talk about STEM topics. I rather like the idea of STEM topics. These are topics that are not the leaves of the tree where you find the real content, but they're pathways to that content. And I think one of the characteristics of landing pages is that their primary role is to provide a route to other pages. So they're going to contain links. Tom Johnson calls them pages at a glance topics, and I've provided a link to that. He has a very interesting article on those types of topics. And finally, I wanted to mention the term keystone concept topics. This is a term that IBM used to use for their landing pages, and because they were based around an important concept, and they would usually provide a small summary of that concept. They'd try and answer quick questions, as well as providing links to all the related tasks. So they were incredibly useful topics. So as I say, they typically provide links to other topics within a specific theme or related to a specific concept or category. But I think it's important to know that they're not restricted to that. In fact, I think the best landing pages will do more. They'll add more value. They'll actually answer questions as well. I mean, Jennifer rightly said that very often the landing page is your starting point. Well, if you start from a landing page and the landing page is able to answer your question without moving anywhere else, then that's a great landing page. It's really saving you time. So sometimes you'll find landing pages will give you a short overview, the brief concept, perhaps a quick video. They'll provide one or two insights. They'll answer some frequently asked questions. IBM used to say with their keystone concept topics that they'd aim to answer the questions that got asked 80% of the time. And they could do that with the landing pages. Landing pages might provide tips or examples. And we're going to see some examples of great landing pages that do these kinds of things. Here's my first example. A lot of my examples are taken from the customer showcase on MadCap Software's website. I have provided links to each of the examples, so when you get my slides, you can click on those links and look at it in real life. This is from Onshape, which is a sort of computer-aided design tool. This is a good example of a landing page. It's interesting, it doesn't actually contain any links within the page itself, within the topic, but it is synchronized to the navigation, the side nav. So you can see the links from this topic to the child topics. And notice it is actually, there are some drop downs on this page which provide more information about how assemblies work on desktop and Android. And there's a little overview on the landing page. So it's not just links, it's actually providing some useful information. The landing page is typically kind of based on the table of content structure of your Flare project. So if we look at this example on the right hand side, this is in fact this example I'm going to be showing you in a few minutes. This is a very simple help system providing help on the Windows Paint application. And there are 4 main sections. There's drawing lines and shapes, there's working with color, there's working with pictures. And I actually have a landing page for each of those main areas. So a landing page on drawing lines and shapes, which gives you a sort of overview of the concept of what you can do with this kind of drawing, and providing links to these child topics. So you can think of, if you know, roughly, you might expect to have a landing page for each of the books in your table of contents, providing links to the child topics. Now, Jennifer said that landing pages are important because they tie into things like context-sensitive help and to search. And one of the reasons they're called landing pages is because we arrive at landing pages. We land on them from, for example, context-sensitive help. So it may be that your users are working in an application that your company provides. They ask for help, and the context-sensitive ID links to a landing page. So in other words, they're taken to a landing page that says, okay, we know where you are in the application. Here are some useful links. Here are some useful tasks that you might want to read more about, as well as providing a little overview and maybe trying to answer those key frequently asked questions. So we can link landing pages to our context-sensitive help IDs. And now we can link it to search as well, because what we can do is using Flare's micro content feature, we can create landing pages that are triggered by search keywords. And what we see then at the top of the search results is effectively a landing page. It's actually what we normally call a featured snippet containing a piece of micro content, but it's going to look and behave like a landing page. In fact, it may even be a kind of reused, cut down version of one of your standard landing pages within your Flare project. So it's going to be quite common now for users to do a search and to end up at the top of search results with a landing page. Really important. What makes them great? Well, as I said, if we can answer the user's question in the landing page without requiring any further reading, well, that's the ideal. That would be a wonderful landing page. It's not going to be possible all of the time. So we do need to provide direct access to the most useful topics. Very often that's going to be the child topics based on the table of contents, but it's not always. It's not always as straightforward as that. There may be other topics which are in different parts of the TOC, which should be accessible from a particular landing page. Taking it further, we want to make it easy for people to read these landing pages and to identify which is the topic to click on. So we've got to make sure that the links we provide are not too cryptic, they're full, they describe clearly what information they lead to, and we've got to make it easy to select. So very often, and we're going to see in our examples, landing pages don't just have little links on them, they have nice big tiles that users can click on. And because those tiles are big, it means there's perhaps a little bit of room for describing what they're going to get when they click on that tile. So not just a brief link, but actually maybe a short paragraph that says, if you click here, this is what you get. So I think hopefully some of the examples and the pointers I give you later on will address some of these criteria. Oh, and my fifth bullet point here is going to be very important. What we're going to be talking about is the fact that our users are often using a range of different devices. And increasingly, people are using tablets and mobile phones to access documentation. So we've got to make sure that these landing pages look good and are easy to use on these small screen sizes. So they need to be responsive. By the way, if you can hear explosions in the background, you may be able to, because they're happening just outside my cabin. It's because it's Guy Fawkes night tonight. It's the 5th of November, and there are people letting off a lot of fireworks right near me. So apologies for that. Very festive feel to the webinar. All right, let's have a look at some more examples that hopefully illustrate some of the points I've just been making. And where better place to start than the help from MadCap Flare itself. What we're looking at here is the landing page for the master pages section of Flare's help. There are a number of topics in Flare's help that explain about master pages, and this is the landing page, which, as we can see, doesn't just contain links, although it does contain links, and that's an important part of the page. It also contains, this nice little image on the right-hand side that if we hover over it, expands and shows us a little example of a footer that's part of a master page. So it's giving us a sort of visualization of a master page, as well as an overview, a little introduction to master pages, an example at the bottom of the screen, and then the links. And those links are categorized to make it easy for users to say, okay, yeah, I need to do something with master pages. So I want to look at these process topics. Oh, good, this will tell me how to create a master page. So I'm kind of guided towards the information that I'm interested in. Now, I mentioned that we can use landing pages as featured snippets in search, and that's exactly what we're saying here. What I've got on screen here is what you see if you search MadCap's help with the terms master page. If you do that, this information that we're seeing right now is going to appear right at the top of the search results. It's called a featured snippet. There will be some other search results below. I haven't included those. I'm interested in this featured snippet. And what we're seeing here is actually very similar to the previous page I showed you. It's just a slightly reduced version. It's a cut down version. In fact, it is sourced from the same topic. When you create micro content in Flare, you can reuse existing topic content, but you can use conditions to filter out the detail that would not be appropriate in this kind of featured snippet. So what we're saying is just a reduced version with some of the content excluded using conditions. And it works really well. It means that anyone who searches on master pages is getting this fantastic little summary right at the top of the search results, telling them what a master page is and providing all the best links that they should follow to get a really full idea of what master pages are all about. And there's also a link to the full landing page in all its glory, with all the detail at the bottom of the featured snippet. This is not on the showcase, but this is a project that I've been working on. I'm hoping it might make it onto the showcase. This is the ILLUMIO docs portal. ILLUMIO has a lot of technical documentation. It's all on their portal. In fact, what they do is they have one Flare project that contains all their documents. Everything that's on the portal is in one Flare project. It's pulled into that project using project linking. They do have individual Flare projects for each of the guides, but they're all pulled into one project. And then there's a landing page for each guide in the project. So you can see we're in the Administrator ASP section. We're looking at the PCE administration guide. And here we are. We see the heading for the landing page, a little bit of information about the guide, very short intro, couple of lines, little icon on the right. Their standard is to use different icons for each of the different types of landing pages, and then links. And these links are actually automatically generated using a menu proxy. So they didn't insert these links using the Flare topic editor. We'll be talking more about using the menu proxy a little bit later. Here's another one from the showcase. This is I mentioned tiles a few minutes ago. This is a sort of very typical tile-based layout for a landing page where each of the different links, I mean, basically we're just looking at 6 links here, but they are, they're very visual links. We have an icon associated with each one. We have the link title, but a little description of each of those. So it's this idea of making it easy for people to choose. It's sometimes not easy just to guess from a very brief 2 or 3 word link what you're going to get. This is giving you more. It's making that choice easier. And by the way, it is possible to click anywhere on the tile in order to follow the link, and I think that's important. So here's a structure of a kind of typical landing page, if you like, with a title at the top, obviously, and then a bit of content. That content might be an overview, might include tips, it might include an example. So we're trying to add value. We're trying to answer people's questions if we can, but then one of the key roles of the landing page is to provide links. And as I say, I like this idea of making these links easy to understand, easy to click on, easy to choose which one is right for you. And a tile-based layout is good. What we need to make sure is that those tiles organize themselves and arrange themselves in a way that is appropriate for the size of screen that our users are viewing on. For example, this kind of layout, three tiles all in a row, that's not going to play well on a mobile phone screen. There just won't be enough width on the screen. It would squash up the tiles too much. So we'd need to rearrange the tiles and perhaps place them, stack them one on top of the other on a mobile phone. And that's really this layout of the links is going to be my focus for most of the rest of this webinar. So how can we automatically rearrange the tiles for different screen sizes? Because obviously we want it to be automatic. We're not going to be there to rearrange the tiles for people. They need to automatically respond to whatever device the user is using. And there's two ways of doing this, as you may know. There is, you can use what we call a responsive layout. And in fact, there is this is what Flare calls it. There is a Flare feature called responsive layout, which uses standard responsive techniques. And Flare provides a very nice UI for this, which we'll look at. But there's another option. And in fact, there's an option which I sometimes prefer to use, which is to use CSS Flexbox, which is a new part of CSS that's been available for the last 3 or 4 years or so. It's very powerful. It is supported by Flare. You can use it. It'll look great in your output. However, there's no UI provided. There's no special tools provided within Flare for doing it. So you are going to be on your own writing the CSS kind of by hand. But it's pretty simple, as you'll see in a few minutes. So let's have a look at the difference between these two types of layout. And I think the best way to show this would be to give you a preview of my little sample project. So here's my sample project I've created in Flare. Very simple little help system, just telling people about the Windows Paint application. I think it's the old Windows Paint from Windows 95 probably. So here we go. Here is the section on working with color. What's going to happen if I click on that is that's going to take me to the first landing page. So I get a heading of working with color. I get a little bit of information about how I can work with color, what I can do with the different tools. Maybe that's enough for some people. And then I have this nice tile-based layout. Oh, and look, it responds as you hover over each of the tiles. Notice I can click anywhere on the tile. I don't have to just click on the link. It works even just clicking right in the top corner of that tile. It's going to take me to follow the link. And it is responsive. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into the inspection tools and zoom in a little. Chrome has a nice little emulator built in, and we can see how those tiles are going to look, first of all, on, what do you want here, an iPad, and this is how it would look on an iPad Pro. This is how it would look on a Moto phone, and you can see that the arrangement of the tiles is changing. All right, let's come out of the emulator, and I've got another landing page, and this is done slightly differently. It doesn't have the fancy icons on it, but that's nothing to do with it being a responsive layout or Flexbox. This is a Flexbox layout. So you see its behavior is slightly different. These two tiles are actually larger than the ones in the top row because there's only 5 links here, so there's only 2 tiles available for the second row, and so they've automatically stretched to fill that row. That is a feature of Flexbox, or one of the options you have on Flexbox. What I might do is just resize my screen, and as I do so, you'll see the layout of those tiles changing. And that is changing, not using Flare's responsive layout feature, but changing using Flexbox. All right, well, let's see what the difference between them is. Well, let's start by seeing what they have in common. What they have in common is that we have a number of tiles, which are what I'm calling items. And each of those tiles has some content. And each of those tiles is inside what we call a container. Now, we didn't see the container was invisible, but there is, in fact, in our topics, there is a container. It is typically a div element. A div element in HTML is an element that can contain other elements. So divs can have multiple paragraphs in them, or they can have other divs in them. Flare actually, in its responsive layout editor, calls the container a row, which is slightly misleading because a row is not necessarily a single row. A row, when it displays, might display as 3 rows because, or in this case, as we're seeing it, even though we're looking at one container, currently all the items are stacked one on top of the other. So we've effectively got 6 rows there within it, but Flare would call it a row because it's one container. So we have a container with items in it. That's what Flexbox and responsive layouts have in common. It might be easier to see if we look at the source HTML or the XHTML. So what we have is typically a div, a containing div with a class name. This is the style name effectively for the responsive layout. And within that div, within that container, we have a number of items. These are, each div inside it is an item, and the item has content. Now, in HTML, normally when you have one div, followed by another div, followed by another div, they would appear in order down the page, with each div appearing beneath the one above. In other words, they'd appear more or less like we just saw here. But we don't necessarily want that. What we want to do is we want to be able to change that to that kind of layout. And we're going to do that using CSS. And it's done using CSS for both responsive layouts and for Flexbox. So you can see, even though this is, remember, Flare calls this a row, this container, but this row now actually has 2 physical rows within it. Flare would still call this a row. It just happens to sort of wrap around and display on what I might call 2 physical rows, 2 actual rows. Now, the way we do this is, I said it was through CSS, and it's actually very simple. It's through 2 key properties, the float property and the width property. What we do is we float the divs and we change their widths for different screen sizes. I don't know, this may seem all very complicated, but it's not. By doing this, we can change the arrangements of cells. Let me show you how it works. Let me show you how it works for a responsive layout first. The way it works with the responsive layout is we set the width of the items, those are the divs inside the container, we set them to a percentage of the width of the container. For example, 50% or 30% or 20%. It's always a percentage. So for example, if we set the width of our cells to 33.33%, which is the closest I can get to a third without going on forever, then our divs would stack one on top of the other, but they'd be less wide. It wouldn't fill the full width of the container. Oh, but remember, we're also going to use that float property. Now, if you set all these divs to float, what will happen is that the second div, instead of going underneath the first one, will float up and fill the available space beside it. And then the third one will fill the space beside that. And because I set them all to be a third of the full container width, now they're filling the top row of the container. And then the other divs will move up and take that space. And so what will happen when all the floats have worked themselves out, this doesn't happen in the way I'm showing you now, it's instant, but this is the result. How do we do that in CSS? Well, all we do is we give our container div a class, a name of, let's say, cell 6, and then all these divs inside, we can set them to have a width of 33.3, and we can set them to float just using this very simple bit of CSS. Now, this is what we call a complex selector, but it's not actually that complex. It's basically saying any div that is inside of a div with the cell 6 class should float left and be a third of the width of the container. So just by putting that tiny bit of CSS into my style sheet, I make all those divs appear layout in that way. Now, I don't want them laid out in that way, perhaps, for the tablets. So I'm going to have to set different widths for the tablets. Maybe I'm going to set them to 50%. So I'm going to set all the divs to 50%. And again, because they're also floating, they're going to move up, and I'm going to get this arrangement. So that's what I'm going to get on my tablet. And to make that happen on a tablet, all I do in my style sheet is I say, okay, for the tablet medium, at media tablet is saying this is just for tablets. And then I say that the divs should now have a width of 50%. Any div inside this container should have a width of 50%. I don't have to repeat the float bit. It will inherit that from the web medium, from the other style I wrote. And then maybe for the mobile medium, I want the divs to just stack on top of each other. So I want each div to fill 100% of the width. So my CSS this time is just width 100 for the mobile medium. So actually the CSS is not very complicated. You could write it yourself. Luckily, though, Flare does provide a responsive layout editor that will write this stuff for you, and I'm going to show you how to do that in just a minute. Flexbox is subtly different. We don't specify the widths of our items in percentages. Instead, we specify a sort of minimum base value. And typically we'll do that in ems, or we might do it in pixels, or we might even do it in centimeters, but not percentages. We say, look, we'd like our tiles to be this wide. Ems is good because ems is sort of based on the size of the characters. So by saying we want our tiles to be a width of 30 ems, we're basically saying, look, we want our tiles to have enough room for about 30 characters on a line. That sounds about right. And so we set that base width, and then the tiles sort of arrange themselves using that base width. And then if there's any space left over, that we can set them to grow automatically to fill the leftover space. So the way it works is this. Here's my container. Here are my divs. I've set them to have a width of 30 ems. But they're not going to appear like that if I'm using Flexbox. What will happen is they're going to arrange themselves in a row. And there's plenty of space left, so I think they can fit another one in. And then there isn't enough space in the container for another 30M. So what Flexbox does is automatically wraps around onto the next line. And then, so now I've got 4 on the top row and 2 on the second. I've only got 4 on the top row because that was how much room there was available. If I was on a smaller screen, there'd be less room available, so it might only fit 2 or 3 or even 1 on the top row, and the others would rearrange themselves automatically. And what's really nice is that I can, with Flexbox, Flexbox can automatically stretch the tiles to fill the available space. So what I end up with is this layout. That's what the users will actually see. So I've sort of compared Flexbox and responsive layout here. With responsive layout, it was all widths expressed as percentages. Flexbox, I was using M's. With responsive layouts, we had to write a different style rule for web, for tablet, and for mobile. Flexbox, you don't need to do that. You do it. You can have one rule, and it just sorts itself out automatically for all the different mediums. There's no media queries. There's no specific breakpoints that you need to set. Again, responsive layouts, you'll see in a minute when we set up a responsive layout, it's designed with a specific number of tiles or a specific number of items in mind. Flare calls them cells. With Flexbox, you don't care how many items there are. You can set up your Flexbox code, and if there's 25 tiles or 3 tiles or 11 tiles, it'll work just as well. Flexbox also controls the height of tiles very well. The only sting in the tail for Flexbox is it's not recognized by Flare's XML editor, but that's not a big thing, and we can work around it. So look, I said I'd show you how to do this. So I'm going to come out of my slides now, or in fact, let's just step through the slides to the end of this little bit, and then I'm going to show you this for real. How am I doing? Yeah, I think I've got time to do this. So look, here's my working with color landing page that I showed you earlier. This is my Flare project. We're looking at the working with color landing page. If I just show you where this is located in the TOC, in the master TOC, you'll see that this is this item in the TOC. I've got the TOC showing in the left-hand pane. I like to do that with Flare. So here's my table of contents. We're looking at the landing page for that item in the table of contents. And oh, you can see I've already set up a responsive layout there. So I'll tell you what, I don't want to, I want to give you the fun of seeing how we do it. So I'm going to create one from scratch here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use Flare's responsive layout editor, which is here on the home ribbon, to create a little 6-tile responsive layout. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to, well, I could just use the responsive layout style that I've already got. You've seen I've done this before. So I do have a style already set up called cells 6, and I could just insert a row, and there we are. I've got a beautiful responsive layout all set up with 3 on the top row and 3 on the bottom, but you didn't see how I did that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to create a new style, a new responsive layout. I'll create a new one, and we'll call it cells 6 new. I don't already have a style called that. I have one called cell 6, but not cell 6 new. And I'm going to base it on this template. It's not exactly what I want, but this is a template which has got 3 cells and 3 cells, 3 tiles, if you like. Flare calls them cells. I've been calling them tiles or items. This has got 3 of equal width. 444 means they're all equal width. And so if I click on OK, that's what I'm going to get. Oh, sorry, I now have a new style. I'm not going to get that row in my topic until I insert the row. So I've just defined a new style that's been added to my style sheet. And if I click on insert row now, that's going to put in a row with my new style. And you can see it's only got 3 cells. What's nice is they've already got a width of 4, 4, and 4. Now, why 4? Well, the reason is that the full width of the container is 12. Okay, this is the way it works. Whenever you create these responsive layouts, think of the container having a width of 12. Think of the screen having a width of 12. And these widths then are using up that allocation of 12. So 4, 4, and 4 altogether makes 12. And they're equal. If I go to the tablet layout in the responsive layout editor, I've still got 3 cells, 4, 4, and 4. Maybe that's not what I want. Maybe on tablets, I think, oh, I haven't got room for 3 in a row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the width of cell 1 for tablets and make it 6 out of 12. So that's going to fill half the screen. Oh, that's bumped cell 3 down to the line below. Okay, that's good. That's what I want. Cell 2, though, is not filling the available space, I need to make that 6 as well. So now I hope you can see cell 2 and cell 1 and cell 2 together are filling the top row. And if I make cell 3 6, then that is filling half of it. But what if I want 6 tiles? I'm left with a sort of odd tile all on its own there on the second line. So I need to add a few more cells. I'm going to add cells now. And as I add cells, Flare is actually going to write more CSS into my style sheet. So it's odd here that as I add content using the responsive editor, as I add cells, as I add tiles, if you like, I'm actually editing the CSS. I'm going to add 2 more cells. So I have 6 cells altogether. These new cells come in, unfortunately, with just a width of 1. And what I want is for them to have a width of 6, 50%, in other words, for the tablet layout. So let's set all of them to have a width of 6. So there we go. Look, I have now 6 items. Now, at the moment, they just say cell 1, but what I'm going to do, obviously, is replace that text with the links to each of my child items. I could drag them from the table of contents, couldn't I? The first link should be to that topic. And the cell 2 should contain the link to painting with a brush topic. I won't do them all. That would be very tedious. But yeah, that's the idea. I'm going to replace these sort of placeholders with my links. So I've got the layout I want for tablet. If we go back to web, we'll see that those additional cells I added don't have the right widths yet. Those should all have a width of 4. So let's set them to 4 and 4 and 4. So there's my tablet layout, and then mobile. For mobile, I want all my cells to have a width of 12 so that they stack one on top of the other. So my cells 4, 5, and 6 need to have a width of 12. Now, this is a one-off task. Once I've done, it seems a lot of work, but once I've done this, once I've set up this responsive layout, I can reuse it on all my landing pages. What I'm effectively doing is configuring the CSS within my style sheet for this responsive layout. And there it is. I'm going to jump to the one I created earlier. This is the one I created earlier using my responsive layout. And you'll see actually that it's got the layout we looked at, but it's also got a little bit of space between the items. And the reason for that is that I've introduced a little bit of margin left between the cells. Now, Flare's responsive layout allows you to do that with this cell offset. The cell offset is a way of adding a little bit of space before each cell, but it only allows you to add numbers 1, 2, 3 out of 12. I'd like a little bit more control about that. I want to control my left-hand margin using percentages and get them exactly how I want. And that's what I've done to get these little gaps here. So one key thing is that I would use Flare's responsive layout editor to sort of create the basic CSS I need. But what I then do typically is go into my style sheet, and I wouldn't actually use Flare's style sheet editors for this. I'd probably do it by opening the style sheet in a text editor. I'm working on the code, and I know that can be a little bit scary for some people, but it's I'm not going to do anything terribly fancy here. If we scroll down, we'll see the CSS that I just added. There's my cells 6 new style, and there's the width of 33 1/3, and that was because I chose a width of 4. Remember, 4 out of 12 is actually 1/3. So what Flare does is it converts it to a percentage. Now, here's what I do. what I would normally do is, having set up my basic responsive layout, I'd say, okay, but I actually want a little bit of space between these. I'd like to have a 5% space before my second tile, and then another 5% before my third tile, so that it's separating the first tile from the second and the third with these little percentages. But unfortunately, that now means that my percentages don't all add up to 100. I've got 33 and a third, 32 and a third, 33 and a third, which is 100. And then I've added in some margin left. So I'm now up to 110%. So that's going to spill onto the next line. So to compensate for that, I would then reduce these down to 30%. So feel free, once you've set up a responsive layout using Flair's responsive layout editor, to go into the code, the CSS code that results, and adjust the values to get exactly what you want. All you've got to make sure is that each sort of physical row, each line of tiles, the percentages, including the widths and the margins, add up to a total of 100%. And that's what I've done with my demo here. So that's how to work with the responsive layout. I wanted to show you how I might set up a Flexbox layout. So let's just go back to my slides. This is where I mentioned you can edit the resulting code. I should also say, by the way, that feel free to go into the CSS and add background colors, shadow, padding, hover effects, which is what I've done. And you can do that literally by just writing some CSS that says any div inside this container, inside this cell 6 container, should have these properties. So that is making all my tiles, all my items within my responsive layout have a nice blue background, have white text with the text centered. Flexbox, you have got to write the code yourself. It's basically the same principle. You're going to have a container div, and then you're going to have divs within your container. And the magic ingredient here is there's a special display property called flex. So that's all the code you need actually to set up Flexbox, is to say, okay, I've got a container div, which is set to flex wrap, that means my tiles wrap round, and when I get multiple rows. And then do you remember I showed you that my tiles could grow? That's just setting each tile inside to have a flex grow property of 1. Oh, and flex basis is that base width setting that I mentioned earlier. I was talking about 30M earlier. Here's a flex basis of 16M. So it's going to fit the tiles in at 16M. When it runs out of room, start a new line. When it's finished laying them out, it's going to grow the tiles to fill the available space. So you would just write that into your style sheet, and that's all you need. I'm going to provide you with my sample project so you can copy the code out of the project and play with it yourself. You are going to get an error in Flare because the flex property is not recognized by Flare's editor, but it will look fine in the preview and in your output. So don't worry too much about that. And your output's going to look like this. I recommend, if you want a way of doing your Flexbox layout nice and easily, what you could do is, let's have a look at this lines and shapes landing page. Here's a landing page, and what I've done is I've added a responsive layout in exactly the same way as I showed you a few minutes ago. So this is a responsive layout. It's only 5 links, so I don't need that 6th cell. So I'm just going to delete that cell using the responsive layout editor. It says, do you want to update the style sheet? I'm going to say no, I just want to change this particular layout in this topic. Yes, I will discard the changes I made. So here we are. I've got some links using a responsive layout. To change that to Flexbox, well, the responsive layout is just a container div with a class with some divs in it. What if I just change that class name to the name of my Flexbox container? That's all I need to do. In fact, I can do it in Flair's XML editor. So I can add a responsive layout. I can go to this set of divs. I can go to the parent div, the container div, and just change its class to my Flex container div class, and now I have a Flexbox layout. And if we preview that, we're going to see, if I save, that this behaves as a Flexbox layout. So you see that bottom tile filling the available space. Now we see our tiles stacking. When I go wide enough, we see 3 tiles on the top and 2 filling the available space. That is Flexbox, that is not responsive layout. So I got that just by setting up the required CSS in my style sheet. That was that little bit of CSS I showed you, which I have down here. Here we are, Flex container. Oops, sorry. Let's go down again. Flex containers display flex, and then the divs within it, 16M and flex grow. I did also add a little bit of fancy background colors and margins and a box shadow just to make them look nicer. But the key bit is the flex property up here. You saw those mouse over effects that I showed you earlier as I hovered over the tile. There's some very nice, useful CSS properties, very simple. There's a box shadow property, a transition property, and the hover pseudo class is what I'm going to use. So what I can do is I can add a shadow to all of my tiles by, again, using a complex selector. This is saying any div inside my container, so all of my tiles should have a shadow. And these are the settings you need to set up shadow, including the amount of shadow vertically, the amount of shadow horizontally, and the color of the shadow, which is black but semi-transparent. 0.25 is the opacity. And this transition setting is a setting that says when it changes, when we hover and we go to a different shadow, how long will it take to transition? So this transition will mean won't be an immediate change. It'll be a nice smooth 0.3 of a second change. How do I set up the hover properties? Well, that's using a pseudo class. So it's a div inside my responsive layout, but using the hover pseudo class, and this shadow is just slightly bigger. It's a bigger shadow. The figures I'm using there instead of 5 and 10 are 12 and 24. I'm using a darker shadow. I'm changing the background color of my tiles, and I'm changing the color of the text. So the key here is just this hover pseudo class for my tiles. And the effect, as we saw, is quite nice. If you don't like it, you can use your own styles, your own shadow effects. But what you want is something that makes it clear that the user is over that particular tile. Remember I mentioned I want my tiles to be clickable. I want to make sure that it doesn't matter where you are on the tile, you shouldn't have to click on the link. And the way I've done that in this particular example is to use somewhat strange HTML. I've actually enclosed the paragraphs, the icon and the text within a link. So I'm using the A tag almost like a bit like a div, like a container. And because everything is inside that link, it means the whole tile is clickable. I have to make sure that the tile itself, the div, doesn't have any padding, a top, bottom, left or right padding. Otherwise, there'd be an area at the top and around the sides which wasn't clickable. But if you set the padding for the div as 0, this link is going to fill the entire div and everything is clickable. That's the trick I used in this particular case. You do have to write a little bit of CSS which says that the link is a block element. That means it's behaving like a div. And I've done this by saying any link inside my tiles are going to be displaying as block. And I've given them some padding. You can also do it by scripting, which I've mentioned here. But if you want to avoid scripting, the method I've just mentioned is good. Now, I've just got time, I hope, to tell you about the menu proxy, because this is a really quick and easy way of doing landing pages. Menu proxy is fantastic. It's a way of automatically generating the links I need to the child topics without me needing to put them in. And what's great is I can put this menu proxy into a master page, so I can have a special master page for my landing pages, and the master page is going to do the job of putting this menu proxy into the topics automatically. What I'm showing here on the right is the settings the menu proxy would have. I want my menu proxy to be context sensitive. In other words, it's not going to show me all the topics in the whole help system. It's just going to show me the topics related to the current page, the current landing page, and I'm interested in the children. And I'm going to use a skin. You can associate a skin, a special skin file to design, to color, to get the right colors and fonts that you want for the proxy. So what this means is I'm going to be able to get some links automatically in my output. Let me show you this for real. Let me open another of my landing pages. So here's a little landing page. This is going to be linking to all the topics to do with working with pictures. I've got a little bit of information at the top. This is here where I want the links. Now I could put in a menu proxy into this topic, but no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the master page that I've already set up. I have a master page called master page LP. That's master page landing page. In it, I have 3 proxies. Sorry, they're not showing because I'm not showing my markers. There they go. I've got a menu proxy underneath my topic body. So that's automatically going to put in a menu proxy, and you'll see it's configured in the way I showed you to show the children. So all I now have to do is to make sure that this topic uses that master page. So I'll go into my topic properties and I'll say, yeah, use that master page that's got the menu proxy. If I now go ahead and build my output, we're going to see a set of links. However, they're not going to look great. They're going to be a set of links, one on top of the other, because a menu proxy is basically just a list of links. What is more, the links are going to include the name of the current topic. Menu proxies always include the name of the current topic, and I don't want that. I've got the name of the topic at the top of the topic. So let me show you what I mean. I've just built the output. Here's the topic that I put that menu proxy in, or that I associated the master page in. So here's my menu. It's great. It gives me all the links to the children, but it's got this unrequired name of the current topic. And also, it's not tiles. It's not responsive. It's just a list of links. So what can I do about that? Well, good news is I can do something about that. If we look at the HTML behind this menu proxy in the output, we'll see I've slightly simplified the HTML here, but basically what we've got is a list of links, and they've included the current topic there. But the current topic has a class of selected automatically attached to it. It always is. The current topic will always have this selected class. So if I can hide that using CSS, it's not going to appear. And the way I can do that is just to say the link with a class of selected inside this special list. The list is always named after the landing page menu skin, the skin you've used for the menu proxy. I want it to display none, and that will make it disappear. And what's even cleverer is if I analyze the HTML that's behind this this menu proxy, you'll see it's actually a list, and a list is a container, and the list has list items, which are items. So I've got a container with child items. This is the structure of a responsive layout, isn't it? Or a Flexbox. So what I could do is I could assign Flexbox properties to this item and to these children to make it behave like Flexbox. So using the correct CSS, and you can, I'm not going to explain this fully because it's a little complicated, but it's basically saying, look, this item, the UL with a class of submenu is set to display flex and to wrap. and that the items beneath it are going to grow automatically. If I add those properties to my style sheet, then it's going to look a lot better than this. I better put my money where my mouth is and prove it. Here's my style sheet. Now I have actually got those. Oh, sorry, that's the style sheet editor. I want this editor. If we look at the end of the style sheet, we'll see I've already added those styles, but I've commented them out. So I'm just going to uncomment them out. So this is just literally 3 or 4 styles, adding the flex properties to those items, and these relate to the items in the HTML output that's generated from the menu proxy. So I'm controlling the presentation of the menu proxy in a way that I can't do through Flair's skin component. So it's a little advanced, but it works. And if I build the output one more time, so it's the same topic I'm building, this working with pictures topic. The beautiful thing is that I'm not adding the links into the topic at all. It's a very simple topic. All I've got to do is make sure this topic has the correct landing page master page. And then in my output, what I get is, let's hope this worked. Yes, a nice Flexbox layout that is totally flexible. This is a menu proxy being controlled using Flexbox. So it's being generated by Flair from a menu proxy, but I'm using CSS to control its presentation. So we have, in the end, what looks like quite a full-featured landing page. And the icing on the cake is, I don't know if you noticed, but my master page also had a little script in it. I've written a little script that not only do I get my my tiles formatted in this way, but my script is going to look at each of these tiles, see which topic it's linked to, go out to each of those topics in real time, grab the little topic description from that topic, because each of the topics, each of my working with pictures topics have a little description, not in the topic itself, but in the topic properties here. This little description here. This is one of Flair's features. You can add a description. What my script is going to do is it's going to pull that description into the tile. So what I end up with is this on my landing page. So this is literally just a menu proxy formatted as Flexbox with a script that is pulling in these little descriptions from each of the child topics. And you only have to maintain those descriptions in the topics themselves. This landing page is totally maintenance free. It's just a menu proxy. That is getting a little advanced. I didn't have time to tell you much about the script. You can look at the script because I'm going to make this project available to you. By the way, it only works when you put this, when you put the output onto a server. So I had to actually have this on deploy it on a server, otherwise the script is not going to work. I did just about get through everything I wanted to show you today. This is a little bit of description of that script. You can read more about the techniques there, and you can look at my script. And that is it. There's my summary. That's summarizing pretty much everything I say, which is landing pages is important. Use responsive layouts or Flexbox for the layout of your tiles on the landing pages. And if possible, automate them using master pages and proxies. Jen, over to you for the wind up on that.
That was wonderful. I think you got everybody's wheels turning on some creative ways to do this, and everybody's itching to get their hands on your project and script. So don't worry, everybody. We will be sending this out so you can tinker and play and learn. Sure. So lots of high fives there. So thanks for that. Just as a reminder to everybody, we do have a wonderful promotion going on in November for new license purchases, any new license, Flair on its own, AMS, Central, you get 15 months for the price of 12, which is a nice way to save some change. So please contact your sales rep if you have a question about this, or just email us at sales@madcapsoftware.com. If you have a need for a new license, a new subscription, please let us know. We're happy to help you out and create a custom quote for you. The other thing, before we get, we won't be able to get to all of these great questions. Please keep them coming. We're going to send a follow-up document because I don't think we'll be able to get to them all. But one thing I do want to remind everybody about is that our Mad World User Conference is going to be happening next October. So I think if we can go one more slide over, Matthew.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have a little, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, reminder, Mad World next October. If you register before the end of the year, you can save up to $1,000. Highly encourage you to check out the schedule and what's coming. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't already attended, we would welcome you there. Super fun event. Okay, Matthew, we've got a lot of good questions. And,
okay.
You know, we're not going to get to them all. So thanks, everybody. For all of the comments and questions that are coming in. But before we get to some of these, a lot of inquiring minds have been asking here, what character are you playing in Alice in Wonderland? We have to know that first before we get to some of the technical stuff.
Yeah, I kind of drew the short straw, and I'm the narrator. So I have quite a lot to do as the narrator. But however, I did get to play the pigeon, the angry pigeon in Alice in Wonderland as well. That was a cameo role, but it was a good one.
Very good. Okay, so let's get to just a few of these questions. One, I thought this was a good question because it's just kind of going back to the beginning, which is, oh, gosh, it left me here. Where did it go? Are there, you know, where did you get these samples of these landing pages? Does MadCap have templates defined with some of these responsive layouts already that can be used and further customized? And I can help with that too.
yeah, go on. Yeah, I mean, as I say, most of the examples I showed were on the showcase, and you can they're not just pictures on the showcase in the gallery. You can they have links to the real life projects, so you can go and visit those pages. You can view source, you can look at the way they've done things. But yes, I know there are various templates available and sample projects, template projects, aren't there, Jen?
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. So on the resources page of the MadCap software website, there are a number of project templates. They were all designed with responsiveness in mind. So many of them have this tiled approach, all designed with responsive layouts already. So they're there to take some of the heavy lifting out for you from some of these design decisions, and then you can customize them going forward. So, but that was a good question. Another question is, and maybe we need some clarification, but I just want to read this off. Is it possible to get a landing page like a featured snippet in search if we were to use a third-party search engine? I'm reading this because I get this question a lot. Or is it specific to the search engine from Flare?
It is specific to the search engine from Flare, or to the Elasticsearch, which is the other option you have from within Flare.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can say is I have worked on a project recently where it was the Flare output was being hosted within a WordPress site, WordPress framework, and the way they'd set it up was you would search in WordPress, but the search query was also passed to Flare, and what you got was a set of results from WordPress as well as a set of results from Flare. And that was pretty neat. And in that case, you would have got the featured snippet at the top of the Flare search results. But if you're kind of replacing Flare search with something else, and you're not using Flare search, then you can't use the micro content for featured snippets, unfortunately.
Right, or the Elasticsearch option.
Or the Elasticsearch, yes.
Yeah.
No,
so Flare and Elasticsearch, correct.
Yes, Flare and Elasticsearch, exactly.
Okay, and regarding Flexbox versus responsive layout, is there one that's better versus, is one better over the other if you've got a larger complex? And now that the term that was used was table, and I know that sometimes can be tricky.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, what I found is that a responsive layout is very often designed with a very specific number of cells in mind. And so you might set up a responsive layout that works really nicely for 6 tiles, and then, oh, marketing department says, oh, we need to add another feature to the portal. We need 7 now. That's really going to break down with a responsive layout, whereas Flexbox would just handle that very smoothly. Flexbox doesn't care how many tiles there are. It's going to automatically organize them the best possible way. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to have the tiles stretching in the way I showed to fill the available space. Another option is to space them out equally and to keep their width, or there's various ways, various Flexbox options you can use to control the layout. So it is very flexible, as the name implies.
Mm-hmm. So can you have multiple landing pages within a project, like a user guide? Is that something that you've seen
you can absolutely, you can, and because you can have landing pages, you obviously you'd have a landing page as your home page, probably, and then you might, as you drill down to sort of chapter level and section level or subsection level, some documentation systems are very large, have a number of different levels, quite a deep hierarchy. You might have a landing page at each level, so a landing page for each chapter, providing a little overview of that chapter with tiles for each of the sections of the chapter. So yeah, absolutely.
Great. And then just as you were talking about the menu proxy technique, a question came in. Does the menu proxy styling change all menus or just the ones that use the particular master page?
The menu styling, it depends how you specify the skin. If you set up what's called a menu skin component, it is possible to select that skin component in your target settings, and then that skin component will be used by default for all menus. However, it is also possible to set the skin for each individual menu, and in that case, you could use different skins for different menus. Yeah, so you may well want to have a menu component that doesn't use Flexbox Layout, that uses different colors, or just uses a straight list of links. So you'd have to have 2 different skin components, and you'd assign the correct skin component to each menu proxy. Obviously, if you assign it to the menu proxy in the master page, then that's going to be used for every topic that uses that master page. But you could have another menu proxy, that you use within a topic or in another master page that could use a different skin component.
Right. All right,
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that was good. And I think we have time for one more. And I know I really appreciate everybody hanging on with us, because we're getting some fun comments about how, time flies when you have so much fun talking about. Who knew landing pages could be so much fun? We'll have to have you back. So again, on the subject of the menu proxy technique, can you create a menu proxy for a landing page using the headings that appear on the same page as the landing page instead of the TOC?
Yeah, you could, because there is an option in the menu proxy to say, instead of linking to other topics, it should link to headings. So absolutely, you could. Yes, it would just be exactly the same technique of you'd just have to write the CSS, which would apply the correct formatting and layout to the resulting HTML from the proxy.
Right. Okay, let's just take one more just for clarification. Doesn't using the Flare side nav skin automatically make design responsive? This is a good question, so I wanted to answer it, because there's different gears that are responsive, right?
It does make your entire, it makes your navigation system responsive. So, which means, for example, that on a small screen, on a mobile phone screen, that side navigation is going to automatically disappear. And it will be replaced by a menu button, a hamburger button that slides in a menu. So that's kind of what we mean by responsive. However, just because you're using a side nav skin, that doesn't make your content responsive. So you would still need to use the techniques I was showing you, the responsive layout or the Flexbox, if you want to have content side by side. The thing about the tiles is, it's arranging links side by side. And the only way to do that is the way I described it. It's not going to happen automatically.
Yeah, that was a great question. So thanks to the person who asked it. Sometimes it's like, well, gosh, my skin's already responsive. Well, you get that no matter what.
That's right.
Right, so we don't have to worry about our thumb and our index finger to use the TOC and all that, but it's all of the stuff within the skin that we want to be mindful of, so that we're not doing this kind of thing, to get around. So that's a great question. All right, well, we've gone over, Matthew. That's fine. I mean, it's always so fun. So thank you so much. It's great. I think everybody's very appreciative. So I think we're just going to have you back and do another one and talk more about these techniques in more detail. So I just want to thank our audience for being so engaged and for all of the great questions. I know we didn't get to everything. I'm so sorry, but we will be working on a follow-up question and answer document to get to everyone, as well as a recording and all of the project bits that Matthew went through today, so that you can all use it and practice and learn, because I think everybody's wheels are turning here. So that was fantastic. So thanks so much, Matthew. As always, we're so grateful that you took the time. Thanks to our wonderful audience, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of the week and weekend, a restful weekend, and hope to see you on the next webinar. So thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jen. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Take care, everyone.